Snow pressed against the world like a silent hand, thick and still, muting the sounds of the forest until even the wind seemed afraid to speak. Trees stood tall and frozen, branches bowed under the weight of winter's breath. A lone dog, fur thick and white like the falling flakes, moved across the crusted snow with purpose. His paws left shallow prints as he stopped now and then, nose lifted, ears alert. The dog's name was Bramble, and he belonged to a man who had stopped believing in anything except silence. That man, Corin Bell, walked behind the dog at a steady pace, breath forming clouds that faded into the gray light. He was not hunting today. He rarely hunted anymore. Not since the accident. Not since the fire that had burned down more than just his house. The mountains had been his escape and his punishment, and now they were simply all he had left. He built a small cabin by the cliffs 3 winters ago, and aside from monthly trips to the trading post, he had spoken to no one. The solitude suited him, or so he told himself. But that morning, Bramble had woken him early, pawing at the door, restless and whining low. Corin had bundled up, checked his traps, and followed the dog east toward the river. The air was colder than usual, biting through his coat, and the snow had fallen hard the night before, erasing every sign of what had come through. Still, Bramble had caught a scent, and Corin had learned long ago to trust him. When the trees thinned and the river came into view, half frozen and dark beneath the ice, Bramble stopped. His body stiffened. A growl rose in his throat, not of threat, but of alarm. Corin scanned the river's edge. At first, he saw nothing. Just ice stretching between the banks, dark water moving sluggishly beneath it. Then a splash of color. A red mitten. Not moving. Corin's heart thudded. He moved closer. And then he saw them. 3 children huddled beneath a thick pine, limbs tangled, faces turned inward. One of them, a girl with dark braids, was curled around 2 smaller figures, a younger girl and a boy, both unmoving. Snow had half buried them, and only the movement of the older girl's eyes gave any sign of life. Corin dropped to his knees. The girl flinched at his presence, her body jerking backward, instinctive, but there was no strength behind it. Her lips were cracked, eyes swollen. She couldn't have been more than 11. The other 2, maybe 6 or 7, were unconscious. The boy's hand was still clutched around a small wooden figure. Corin didn't speak. There was no point. He pulled off his gloves, checked for breath. Barely there. He wrapped the boy in his coat, lifted the smallest girl in his arms, and looked down at the older one. Her gaze was defiant even through her fear. She stood, legs shaking, then fell, and Corin caught her before her face hit the ice-crusted ground. Bramble barked once and turned toward the woods. They would have to move fast. The cabin was nearly 2 miles uphill. Corin didn't think. He just moved. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun had started to fall behind the ridge. The wind had picked up, and the snow fell harder. Corin laid the children on his cot and built the fire higher. He wrapped them in furs, brought broth to their lips, and waited. The girl was the first to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, then closed again. She didn't speak. When she finally did, it was in a whisper he barely caught. Her name was Laura. The younger ones were her siblings, Kai and Millie. They had been walking for days, she said. Their wagon had broken. Their uncle had gone to find help, but never returned. She hadn't known where to go. She'd just followed the river. They had no food, no map, just each other. Corin didn't ask questions. Not yet. He didn't want to scare her, and something in her eyes told him she wouldn't answer even if he did. She had that hollow look, the kind he'd seen in the mirror too many times. That night, Corin sat by the fire, Bramble at his feet, the children asleep behind him. Snow battered the windows. The wind whistled like a warning. Corin hadn't shared his cabin with anyone in years. The presence of the children made the small space feel alive in a way he didn't expect. It unsettled him. The way Millie curled into the crook of her brother's body, the way Laura's hands gripped her sleeve even in sleep, it all pulled at something inside him that had been buried deep. He thought of his sister, of her little boy, both gone now, lost to something colder than winter. He hadn't spoken their names in months, maybe years. Now he couldn't stop hearing them. The next morning, Laura woke first. She watched him with suspicion as he boiled water. Kai coughed in his sleep. Millie whimpered once and turned toward the fire. Corin offered Laura bread and dried meat. She took it with shaking hands but said nothing. After she'd eaten, she asked about a town. Was it far? Would someone come looking? Corin gave her vague answers. She didn't press. It was as if she knew better than to hope. Instead, she helped him clean the fireplace, gather wood, fold blankets. She moved like someone who had done this before, too young to know survival, yet somehow old in her silence. That afternoon, she sat by the window, watching the trees. Corin saw her fingers moving slowly, as if she was counting something, or praying. He thought again about asking her more. About the uncle, about where they came from. But something in him hesitated. That night, Bramble growled low. Corin stepped outside, rifle in hand. The moon was half hidden behind clouds. Snow drifted sideways. At the edge of the clearing, just beyond the tree line, he saw a shape. A man, standing still, watching. Corin raised the rifle, called out. No answer. The shape moved back into the trees. Gone. Corin didn't sleep. He checked the doors. Sat near the fire with his rifle on his knees. In the early hours, Kai woke crying. Corin went to him, held a cup to his lips. The boy's voice was faint. He asked if his uncle had come back. Corin told him to rest, that he was safe now. But even as he said it, he felt the lie in his throat, because he didn't know who that man was, or what he was waiting for. And for the first time since the fire, Corin felt afraid, not for himself, but for the three strangers now sleeping under his roof, and for whatever trouble they might have brought with them. The morning after the figure appeared at the edge of the trees, Corin didn't mention it to Laura. He watched her from across the cabin as she helped Kai sit upright and fed him small bites of bread. Millie slept beside the hearth, cheeks flushed with warmth at last. Outside, the wind had quieted, but the air still held the sharpness of ice. Corin packed a small satchel and checked his rifle. He told Laura he needed to check his traps and left Bramble behind with her, though the dog paced at the door, whining to follow. Corin didn't want to take the dog in case the man came back. He didn't want to leave the cabin unguarded. He moved quickly through the snow, eyes scanning the tree line. The forest felt changed, tense somehow. The usual stillness had turned into something thicker, like silence holding its breath. He reached the far trap line near the old ravine and stopped. One of the snares was missing. Not tripped missing. The branch it had been tied to had been cut clean. No animal had done that. Human hands. Corin felt the hair on his neck lift. He turned and moved back toward the cabin, faster now, checking the trail behind him. He didn't see anything, but the forest felt too quiet. When he returned, Bramble met him at the edge of the clearing, tail stiff, eyes locked on the woods. Nothing had happened, but the dog's unease said enough. Inside, Laura looked up quickly when he entered. Her hands were clenched around a ladle. She asked if someone was out there. Corin paused, then nodded. She didn't look surprised. Just tired. She said the man they called uncle wasn't really their uncle, just someone who'd taken them after their mother died. He'd said there was land north of the ridge, that they could build something. But as soon as they were deep into the woods, he changed. His voice, his eyes. He started drinking. He shouted at night. He hit Kai once. Laura had tried to leave once, but he caught her. He said she owed him. Said no one would care if they vanished. That no one would come looking. Then the wagon broke, and he went for help. That had been 4 nights ago. She hadn't wanted to wait. Something told her he wasn't coming back. Or worse, he was. Corin listened without interrupting. When she finished, she looked at him with eyes too old for her face. She asked if they could stay. Not forever. Just until spring. Corin said yes. Not because he had planned to, but because saying no felt wrong. That night, the wind returned. Bramble scratched at the door again, ears pricked, growling low. Corin stepped out, rifle in hand. This time he saw more. 3 sets of tracks in the snow, circling the cabin. The firelight hadn't reached that far. Whoever had been out there was watching. Waiting. Corin followed the prints as far as he dared, but they split in different directions, then vanished. He returned, locked the door, and added another log to the fire. The next day, the children stayed close to the walls. Even Millie didn't hum as she had before. Corin taught Laura how to stack kindling, how to listen for animals in the woods. She learned fast. Kai was getting stronger. His fever had broken, but he still wouldn't talk much. He stayed close to Laura, as if afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. That evening, as the sun set, Corin spotted something hanging from a branch at the edge of the clearing. A scarf. It wasn't there before. He approached slowly, Bramble at his side. The fabric was damp, frozen at the edges. It was Millie's scarf, the one she'd lost 2 days ago near the river, which meant whoever was watching had been close enough to find it, close enough to leave it. Corin burned it in the fire without a word. Later that night, he found a note wedged beneath a stone by the back door. A single sentence written in rough, smudged pencil. She was promised. Corin stared at it for a long time. Then he burned that too. He didn't sleep. Neither did Bramble. Laura asked no questions the next morning. She only helped him load the rifle. Corin began fortifying the cabin, blocking windows with spare wood, checking the door latches twice. He taught Laura how to hold the rifle, how to aim. She didn't flinch. That night, Bramble barked twice. Sharp. Urgent. Corin moved fast. There was movement in the trees. A flash of red. Then a voice, slurred, angry, calling Laura's name. She froze by the hearth, face pale. Corin stepped outside. A man staggered into view, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, coat torn. He shouted that he wanted the girl, that she belonged to him. Corin didn't answer. The man drew a knife. Corin raised his rifle. The man laughed, said he wouldn't shoot, said men like him always hesitated. Then Bramble lunged. The knife clattered to the snow. The man screamed, scrambled backward, and vanished into the trees. Corin fired once into the sky. Then silence returned. The next day brought sunlight and calm. But no one smiled. Corin checked the forest, found signs of 3 camps. All abandoned. But footprints led north, toward the ridge. He knew what that meant. They weren't leaving. They were regrouping. That afternoon, Millie laughed for the first time, chasing Bramble through the snow. Laura watched with a kind of sadness. Corin carved a small wooden dog for Kai, who held it tight, like it might protect him. That night, Corin gave Laura a choice. They could leave, head toward the town, risk the wild. Or they could stay, dig in, and fight if they had to. She looked at her siblings. Then she said they were tired of running. The next day was spent in silence. Corin showed Laura how to set traps not for animals, but for men. Wire between trees. False snow patches. He told her where to hide. Told Kai and Millie what to do if they heard glass break. As dusk came, the forest quieted again. That dangerous kind of quiet. Corin loaded the rifle. Bramble growled low. And when the first bottle broke against the side of the cabin, flames licking the window, Corin didn't hesitate. He opened the door and fired. The snow lit up with sparks. Men shouted. Laura screamed from inside. Bramble leapt forward. A second figure emerged, swinging a crowbar. Corin dropped him. Another ran. Fire crackled against the wood. Laura ran to the pail, threw snow over the flames. Kai pulled Millie under the table. One more man, a younger one, stepped into view, trembling, a torch in hand. He paused, saw the rifle, dropped the torch, ran. Then nothing but the sound of Bramble panting, the fire dying, the wind returning. One man dead, one wounded, one vanished. Corin stood in the doorway, blood on his coat. Laura beside him, eyes wild. But she didn't cry. She just held her siblings tight. And Corin, for the first time in years, felt something stir. Not anger, not grief. Something like resolve. The danger had not ended, but something had changed. The silence was no longer empty. It had weight now. And the fire inside the cabin burned steady through the night. The morning after the attack, the snow fell soft and slow, as if the sky had grown tired of violence and was trying to hush the world again. The fire inside the cabin had burned low, but it hadn't gone out. Corin rose early, his shoulders stiff, his thoughts heavier than ever. He buried the man who had fallen near the steps without a name or a prayer. Laura stood nearby with Millie asleep against her shoulder, her eyes hollow but steady. Kai didn't speak. He hadn't since the fire was thrown. Bramble circled the grave, then lay down in the snow, guarding it in silence. The forest had gone quiet again, but it wasn't peace, it was retreat. Waiting. Corin didn't know how many more would come, but he knew someone was behind it. Not just that man with the knife or the drunk who shouted her name. Someone had wanted Laura back badly enough to send others. And someone still wanted her now. That night, Corin looked through an old box he hadn't opened in years. Inside were things he thought he'd forgotten, letters, a photograph, medals from a war no one wanted to remember. But at the bottom, under a cloth, was a folded map. It showed land claims across the forest region. Handwritten notes marked certain spots. He stared at one corner near the river. A faint name had been scratched over and replaced, Harlandry. The name meant nothing at first. Then he remembered the scarf. The way the first man had said she was promised. A transaction. A claim. Laura didn't know the name, but when Corin asked her what her uncle used to talk about, she said something strange. He'd said the forest had value. Not the trees. The ground. That someone had paid him to bring them here. Said once the snow melted, things would move fast. That the kids didn't matter. Just that the paperwork would make sense if she signed. Corin felt a sickness in his gut. Someone had arranged to claim the land using her. And someone else was cleaning up the mess now. They weren't just running from one man. They were tangled in something bigger. But Corin didn't tell her that. Not yet. He only said she and the others needed to be hidden better. That night, he led them to the old root cellar, deeper than most, dug years ago when he first built the cabin. He stocked it with food, water, a lantern. Bramble stayed with them while Corin went back up. He didn't sleep. Instead, he packed supplies, loaded both rifles, and waited by the fire. The snow slowed, then stopped. Then, near dawn, a knock. Calm. Single. Measured. Not a stranger crashing through the woods. Someone who wanted to be let in. Corin opened the door with the rifle raised. A man stood there in a long coat, trimmed beard, hat low, clean boots, unbothered by the weather. His voice was quiet. He said his name was Harlan Dree. He was here for the girl. Said she was part of a deal gone wrong. Said she had something that belonged to him. Corin asked what. The man smiled. Said that didn't matter. Only that she came with him now. That it would be easier. Cleaner. Corin didn't move. Harlan said a few more words. Soft, persuasive. Said Corin looked like a man who'd lost enough already. Said he could walk away from this. No shame in it. Corin didn't reply. Behind him, Bramble growled once from the cellar door. The sound made Harlan's eyes narrow. He asked one last time. Said next time he wouldn't ask. Corin told him there wouldn't be a next time. Harlan tipped his hat, smiled like someone who'd already won, and walked back into the woods. For the next 2 days, the forest was empty. No footprints. No firelight in the distance. But Corin didn't believe they were gone. He taught Laura how to reload. How to listen. He gave Kai a whistle, told him to use it only if something happened. Millie began drawing with charcoal on scraps of wood. She drew Bramble with wings. She called him their guardian. Corin couldn't tell if she meant it as a game or something deeper. The air was thinner now. Spring beginning to press against the edges of winter. Melted patches appeared near the river. Birds returned, cautious. But the danger hadn't passed. On the third night, they came. Not through the front. Through the back. Smoke bombs first. Shouts. The sound of boots crunching snow. The cabin filled with haze. Corin pulled Laura toward the cellar, shoved her inside, told her not to open the hatch unless he said her name. Bramble stayed behind, teeth bared. Corin stepped into the smoke. 2 figures rushed him. He fired. One went down. The other clipped his shoulder, and Corin stumbled, but didn't fall. A third burst through the front. A woman this time, shouting that the girl was stolen, that the land was legal, that she had the documents, that Laura wasn't his to keep. Corin fired into the air. She ducked, ran. Then Harlan stepped into view. Come again. As if the chaos didn't touch him. He said the law would back him. That papers had been signed. That the girl's mother had owed money. That this was all just repayment. That Corin was nothing but a broken old man playing hero. That no one would believe him. Corin didn't reply. He just stepped forward. Harlan raised a gun. Corin fired first. The man's body fell without ceremony. Bramble growled, blood on his muzzle. The woman screamed and fled into the woods. The others followed. One more tried to shoot back from the tree line. Laura, from the cellar, fired through the broken wall. The man fell. And then, silence. In the pale light of morning, the bodies were counted. The fire was doused. The land was still theirs. Corin buried the dead, this time with names. Or at least the names they gave. Laura sat by the river, arms around her siblings. Kai clutched Bramble's fur. Millie whispered to the wind. Said thank you. That night, Corin opened the cellar, told them it was over. Laura didn't ask how he knew. She just nodded. Spring came fast after that. The snow melted in slow waves. The ground turned soft. Flowers returned, stubborn and small. Corin repaired the cabin. Laura helped, learned how to sandwood. Kai ran with Bramble through the grass. Millie laughed. Loud now. Often. The land, once empty, felt full. Alive. One evening, as the sun sank gold behind the trees, Laura asked Corin why he had helped. Why he had risked everything for children he didn't know. Corin didn't answer for a long time. Then he said once, long ago, he had a sister. She had a girl not so different from Laura. A fire had taken them, and he'd left the world after that. Hid from it. Until now. Until a dog found a girl by the river. and gave him a reason to believe again. They sat in silence for a while. The wind soft, the river speaking in whispers. Laura reached out, touched his hand, said thank you. Corin said nothing, just squeezed her fingers back. And in the distance, birds called through the trees, and the fire crackled behind them, not as a warning, but as warmth. For the first time in years, Corin slept through the night. No ghosts, no nightmares, just breath, just home. The past buried, the present chosen, and the future unwritten, but waiting.